Family history is supposed to give you answers. Names, dates, a straight line from them to you. But sometimes the further back you look, the harder it is to see. I'm Oliver Lott. My second great grandmother was Josephine Miller. Since the 13th of August 2023, my grandfather Ray and I have been trying to locate our family history, but most importantly, who Josephine really was. And what we found out is that her name, her age, her origins, the story about her mother, was at least partially untrue. The question we keep coming back to is, did she know, or was she told the story many a time to the point she believed it herself? We still don't have an answer, but this is what we found. My great-grandfather, Francis Hubert Lott, or who we called Frank, left an account of his life, everything he could remember. He dictated it out loud in his later years, and my grandfather Ray wrote it down as he spoke. With Bill, William David Lott, my first cousin twice removed, and my granddad's first cousin there alongside him. They both asked for some family history. The document itself is 4.5 pages. It covers his father's arrival in Newcastle, the pub on New Bridge Street, HMS Hood, the collection rounds, the house in High Heaton, and in general it's just a remarkable document. We will get into that further into this documentary. However, within this document there's a paragraph, the only description this family ever had of his mother's origins. My mother was born Josephine Miller in Kelso in the Borders in 1893. Her mother died in childbirth. As a result, her father, who she described as a traveller, took her to Rothbury in Northumberland to live with her Uncle Jim and Aunt Ada. I believe that there are still members of the Miller family living in the Rothbury area. My mother attended the original village school in Rothbury. That's it. That's the paragraph. Her maiden name is Josephine Miller. She was born in 1893 in Kelso in the Scottish Borders. Her mother died in childbirth, father was a traveller, and she'd moved to Rothbury at a young age to live with her Uncle Jim and Aunt Ada because of this. She went to the original village school in Rothbury. We also knew, because our family kept the death certificate, that she died on the 17th of August 1964. 74 years old, it said, which would put her birth as being 1890. Except she told her son it was 1893, 3 years difference, and that's before we'd found anything else. Another thing we knew is that she used the name Ina or Ina as a nickname. It was used for Georgina or Josephina. No one really knew, as it was a quote-unquote nickname. My grandfather Ray tried to look into him, before him Bill, the cousin who sat in on the dictation. He had wanted to research the family, but never got far. Then Bill's brother Alan tried. He theorised an Irish workhouse birth. However, we as an immediate family, including my great-auntie Chris and my grandfather, we both knew it had to be England or Scotland. We all kept hitting the same wall, but that wall, turns out, it was her. By Christmas 2025, it spent over 2 years searching for a birth certificate. 2 years of dead ends, wrong names and wrong years. So what did we do? We finally caved and ordered the marriage certificate. Before you commit to buying a marriage certificate through the GRO, General Register Office, you get a preview, just enough to see the name. And the name on the preview read Josephine F.I. Miller. Me and my granddad looked at that and thought for a while. We eventually settled on the meaning being perhaps Father Isaac, since after looking at the 1891 census, we concluded since the father wasn't in the picture, this would be a way to memorialise him. So we spent £12.50 and ordered the marriage certificate. Josephine Frederick Ina Miller. Not Father Isaac, Frederick Ina. Two names that had never shown up on any other document, not even together or not even separately at this point. Two names we had absolutely no idea what to do with. Frederick we'd eventually recognise from the birth certificate. However, Ina being from perhaps Georgina, as I mentioned previously. However, we'd previously misread it to say Frederick Ima as a way of saying perhaps I'm a Miller, clearly I am a Miller, or perhaps a way to legitimise Frederick, with Frederick Ima being Hebrew for mother of Frederick. The reason why that was a theory was due to the fact that Frederick was born outside of wedlock as well, but this time we knew we had something new to search. We tried Josephine Miller, Georgina Miller, just Josephine and just Georgina. Just Miller in the extreme case of her being called Josephina or something, due to a name she was given by people close to her, different year ranges, different registration districts. We widened the net again and again and again. Nothing came back that matched. And then one day, a result came up that I'd probably scored past before. The preview read, Georgina Freda Miller, born 1890 in Kelso. Freda, not Frederick. The website had cut the name off mid-word, which is almost certainly why it never surfaced before. Nobody types Freda into a search bar, but 1890 matched the rough time frame, and Kelso matched the place, and Freda was close to Frederick, the middle name on the marriage certificate, and we thought it had to be worth investigating. We spent £16. Georgina Frederick Miller, born 26 July 1890, 115 Roxburgh Street in Kelso, and the mother, Catherine Miller, née McNeil. There she was. The woman who had been called Josephine for over 60 years finally had a birth certificate, and it didn't mention Josephine anywhere. And the year on it was 1890, not 1893 as she had told her son, my great-grandfather, not 1888 as she gave on the marriage certificate, later censuses, and even on the Lusitania, not 1891 as the census has it in Hexham. 4 different years, and now we've got a 5th, 1890. That comes from the one document she didn't fill in herself. The question isn't just why she changed the year, it's whether she was ever fully sure what the true year was. Think about the logistics of that kind of life. Every milestone we have on record after she left Kelso is a monument to her own reinvention. On a marriage certificate, she makes herself older, maybe to seem more mature, or maybe to match a lie she had said many times before, as in when she was working at the RBI, or maybe when she was going on the Lusitania. On some censuses, she's younger, on others, she's older. But in the summer of 1890, at 115 Roxburgh Street in Kelso, my great-great-grandmother didn't have a say. She was just a newborn, in a drafty room perhaps. Isaac and Catherine looked down at her and registered her as Georgina Frederick. I'm here at 115 Roxburgh Street in Kelso, or as the Scots say in Gaelic, Calcai. This is the address on the birth certificate. This is where Georgina Frederick Miller came into the world on the 26th of July 1890. It took us 2.5 years to find it, and now I'm standing outside it. Her father Isaac was a hawker, a travelling trader, no fixed shop, always moving, and yet here was an address, a number on a door. For one moment in her life there was somewhere specific to point to. It may be that this house belonged to relatives, or a landlord. Hawkers didn't tend to own property, but someone lived here. After this, she starts to move too. There's only one place this woman was born in, and it was here in Kelso. In that very house there. It took us 2.5 years to find it, and here I am, now sat outside 115 Roxburgh Street. However, you can clearly see that they aren't the original ones when Georgina was born. They've changed a lot over the last 136 years. Her mother would be gone within the next few years, or at least that's what Georgina would later tell her son would be more complicated, but it started here.
The birth certificate tells us Georgina's parents were Isaac Miller and Catherine Miller. When we looked further, we found a marriage record, or something that claims to be one. Catherine Miller, with an E, née McNeil, and Isaac Miller, married on the 29th of July 1889 in Govan, Glasgow. This is on Georgina's birth certificate. Georgina was born on the 26th of July 1890, exactly almost to the day 1 year after the marriage in Govan. Convenient timing. Very convenient timing. Whether they were formally married or whether that entry was submitted after the fact to legitimise what was coming, we can't say with any certainty. What we can say is that within a year, this family had been in Govan, to a street in Kelso, 9 months later in Little Street in Newcastleton in the Borders.
I'm here at Mid-Little Street in Newcastleton. In the 1891 census, she's seen here, 8 months old, as a visitor, somewhere amongst these 3 houses in Mid-Little Street. Other visitors include Isaac Miller, who we now know as the father, aged 26, who's a hawker, and a mother, Catherine, who's aged 28, who's a hawker wife from Greenock. This further contradicts my great-grandfather's wording, saying that her mother died in childbirth. Her mother did not die in childbirth, as she is seen here, and she's also seen in the 1901 census in Hexham. I'm here outside of where 10 Gate Bank used to be in Hexham. In the 1901 census, this is where Georgina's mother was visiting, with her future husband and Georgina herself. But this time, Georgina's under a new first name and Catherine's under a new married name. They were both listed as visitors. The story Georgina told her son was that her mother died in childbirth. It's the story that explained everything. Why her father took her to Rothbury, why she grew up with Uncle Jim and Aunt Ada. Her dead mother is a closed door. No more questions. Her new name is Catherine Ainsworth. Her new husband, Christopher L. Ainsworth. L standing for Lawrence. Both aged 38 and as a visitor in this address, but listed with them is a young girl at 10 years old called Josephine F. Miller. That's Georgina, 10 years old, already going by Josephine, staying with her very much alive mother and the mother's new husband. The mother had moved on, had a new name, a new husband. We don't know what happened between Catherine and Isaac. We don't know why the family became apart. The census gives us nothing, except the plain fact of the agreement. Deb doesn't have a new husband and a new name on Gate Bank. Deb doesn't leave questions about if she ever came back for her daughter, whether she thought about her, whether she had reasons that we'll never be able to know. He wrote it down and the family believed it for many years. In the 1891 census, 8 months old, Georgina appears with her parents, Isaac and Catherine, in Newcastleton. She's the right age here. Everything adds up perfectly, except for one massive detail. Catherine is standing right there beside her, and she's alive and she's well. The story my great-great-grandmother always told was that her mother died giving birth to her. It was the emotional anchor of her entire childhood narrative, and here they are on paper, mother and daughter under the same roof in Newcastleton, in Mid-Liddle Street. By 1901, she's in Hexham, and she's already Josephine. The name Georgina is just gone, or in the process of going. She's 10 years old, the correct age once again, and she's already started the process of becoming someone else. The 1901 census also contradicts what she said to her son. Her mother is still very much alive, only now Catherine has seemingly remarried. The family structure has shifted, names have changed. Right in the middle of it, a 10-year-old girl decides to rewrite her own identity. We don't know exactly when the name changed. By the time it's the 1911 census, she's working as a housemaid in Newcastle at the RVI, age listed as 22. She is simply Josephine Miller. No trace of Georgina anywhere on the official record. She would have been 20. The record says 22. And the following year, March 1912, she gives birth to a boy. His father's name was Kemp, and that's all we know about the boy's father. The boy is born outside of wedlock. Josephine gives him the Church of England Rapes and Strays Society. He's placed in St Aidan's Home for Boys in Tynemouth. This is a home that opened in 1906, ran by Mr. and Mrs. Tulloch, training boys in trades, aged 7 to 15. The family knew him as Bert. My great-grandfather knew he existed. He mentions going to Tynemouth Grammar once with his mother to discuss Bert's education with someone. A headmaster or a teacher? We don't know, but it was one visit. That's the extent of his knowledge of where Bert lived, how his days were spent. He just appeared occasionally, and then one day he didn't. He just vanishes from our family's oral history. No further visits, no letters, no mention of him around the dinner table. Think about what that does to a person. First, you create a tragedy, inventing a mother who died in childbirth, perhaps to cope with the reality of a fractured stepfamily. Then you discard your own name, then your true age, and then out of sheer survival or societal shame, you hand over your firstborn child to an institution run by strangers, keeping him just close to visit once, to check on his schooling, before letting the fog roll in completely. For years, the story was that Bert just went away to the USA. That was the phrase that passed down. He went away. But people don't just move to the US on their own accord at the age of 16. We found the admission logs for the Rapes and Strays Society, and there, right at the end of his record, the mystery of his disappearance is laid bare. He didn't just fade away. On the 29th of June 1928, at the age of 16, Bert boarded on the SS Doric at Liverpool docks. He was being sent to Canada. The ship had arrived in Sherbrooke, Canada on the 7th of July, and from there he was taken to the Gibbs home. More information on his ship ride will be discussed later. By 1911, she's here, in Newcastle, as a housemaid right here at the RVI. This building, this institution, would have been part of the city she walked through every single day. And on the 17th of August 1964, 53 years later, she came through these doors, and she didn't leave. The death certificate registers her as Josephine Georgina Lott. The family saw Georgina on the certificate, with Josephine being the real name. And Georgina was what some people happen to call her. They had it exactly backwards. Georgina was the name she was born with. Josephine was the name she chose, and she never corrected them, not once. Not once, as far as we can tell. Not at the end, not ever. The death certificate was signed by her son Edward. He was the youngest. He was the one who registered her death, because Edward put down that she was 74 years old when she passed. How did Edward know that she was 74? How did he know 1890? She told her son Frank, my great-grandfather, that she was born in 1893. Frank wrote it down, and the family believed it for decades. They didn't trust the grave, but Edward put down 1890, the year on the birth certificate, the year on the gravestone. Did she tell Edward the truth? Did she only trust her youngest? Or did he find something after she died? We don't know, but we can't ask due to Edward's passing. But someone knew, and Edward was the one that put it in ink. If Edward did indeed find the birth certificate, why would he have put Josephine as the first name? In October 1914, days before Halloween, Josephine Miller boarded the RMS Lusitania at Liverpool and boarded for New York. She listed herself as a nurse. Her age, 26, which would put her born in 1888, not the real 1890. The same ship, a German U-boat, sunk 8 months later, killing over 1,000 people. She sailed on it, she crossed the Atlantic, and she also came back. What she did in America, what she saw, who she saw, what she was actually doing there, she never said. We don't know if she generally worked as a nurse, or whether she listed it as an occupation because it sounded more legitimate than housemaid or barmaid. We don't know if she ever had training, or she simply just said that she did. She came back though. She is a young woman who has crossed the Atlantic on one of the most famous ships in the world, 6 months before it was torpedoed, and she never mentioned it. Not to anyone, not to her son, not to her husband, not to any of her children, not to anyone as far as we know. Perhaps the Josephine Miller who stepped on that boat and sailed to New York was someone who she left behind when she came home to Newcastle. We just don't know. On the 29th of May 1916, she gave birth to a baby boy, Frederick Clifford Lott, outside of wedlock with a man named Francis Hubert Lott as the father. My great-great-grandfather. According to the account, she was working at the Durham Rocks at this time, near the bus station west of Central Station, before going on to manage a pub on Newbridge Street. I'm here on Westgate Road near the old bus station. This is the area where the Durham Rocks stood. The pub Josephine was working in 1916. The pub is gone. The street has moved on entirely. Behind me now, where the Durham Rocks used to be, is now a Lebanese restaurant. This is the right geography. It's just west of the Central Station, where the buses used to come in. She's working here, or nearby, raising a young child outside of marriage in the middle of a war. Bert is somewhere in Tynemouth. Frederick Clifford, her son with Francis, is living with her as a baby, and she's managing a pub. It's worth being clear about what that means. Managing a pub in wartime Newcastle, possibly engaged, with an infant in a city full of men coming and going from the Western Front. She was working in one of the most exposed environments in the entirety of the UK, and yet she managed. She later went on to manage the pub on New Bridge Street for the owner Fitzgerald, according to the account. A step up from barmaid to manager, in wartime as a single mother. On the 21st of December 1919, she married Francis Hubert Lott. Her name, Josephine Frederick Ina Miller. Her father, Isaac Miller, blacksmith, deceased. He was listed as a hawker in 1891, travelling trader, not a blacksmith. Even his occupation was rewritten. A blacksmith sounds more settled. A hawker is someone who doesn't stay. By the certificate's calculation, she was born in 1888. She was born in 1890. She signed her full name, Frederick Ina. Names that appear nowhere else together, and then she became Josephine Lott, and those names went back wherever she kept them. Francis Hubert Lott had arrived in Newcastle years before. His earliest record here was as a motorcar driver, as a chauffeur rather, by Sir Robert Duker at Angerton Hall, between Morpeth and Cambro. The address on the licence, Stitchell, Kelso. Talking about Stitchell House, which has now been knocked down. However, Kelso, the same town she was born in. Whether they knew each other from Kelso, or whether that was coincidence, we don't know. But of all the towns in England and on the Scottish borders, the man she ended up marrying had at some point been in Kelso. There was a moment in my great-grandfather's account that is so small and specific that I've thought about it more than almost anything in this whole investigation. In the period just before my great-grandfather's death, before Francis died in April 1935, a young man turned up at the house in Acton Place. He had a form for Josephine and Francis to sign, consent for him to emigrate. The paragraph reads, "During the period just prior to the death of my father, Bert turned up to the house with a form for my parents to sign, which would give consent for Bert to emigrate to the USA. While the form was being completed, Bert went into our parents' bedroom and came out wearing father's grey trilby hat. He said he liked it. Being a handsome lad, my father said he could have it. This left my father with his flat cap and no trilby. Such was the man of the man." Such was the man of the man. My great-grandfather didn't like Bert. He says so in the account, flatly. "I did not like him, and was glad to see the back of him when he emigrated." He says it matter-of-factly, without elaboration. There was something about Bert that made him not like him. And there was Josephine, watching her son try on her husband's hat, signing the emigration papers. Whatever she felt about any of it, she didn't say. Bert, Samuel Herbert Miller, boarded the SS Historic with a group of Waifs and Strays boys, bound for the Gibbs home in Canada. The Church of England records show him being born in March 1912, to be specific, the 13th. I found a photograph of the boys on board that ship. Only one of them is wearing a trilby. That's Francis Lott's hat, on Bert's head, crossing the Atlantic. Only time the family heard from Bert again was asking his mother for money to buy a horse. He was writing from Canada. She'd had him, she'd given him away. He'd come back once, tried on a hat, taken it with him and gone to Canada. And the last she'd heard from him, money for a horse. I don't know what that felt like. I don't think we're supposed to know. I'm here at number 27 Acton Place in High Heaton, and later in 1934 they moved next door to number 29. This is where Josephine lived for most of her adult life, where she brought up 3 boys, where Bert turned up one day with his emigration papers and tried on her husband's trilby, where she heard one day in May 1941 what had happened to Frederick, where Francis, her husband, had died on the 22nd of April 1935, where he was aged 54. She was 44. 3 boys, Fred, aged 18, my great-grandfather Frank, aged 12, and little Edward, just 6. Edward was born, according to the family, with a veil over his face, which folklore said the child would be lucky. The state gave her 10 shillings a week. That was it, a widow's pension. She could have had the boys taken to the Waifs and Strays Society, just like she had done with Bert. She didn't. She took a collection job. She worked for A.E. Cook of Savile Row in Newcastle. Then a second round for Frank Cook, supposedly A.E. Cook's brother, a coal merchant. My great-grandfather, young Frank, would help her after school. out collecting money from Heaton, Biker, Eldick, Sandyford, Benwell. He and Edward would run home and make dripping sandwiches for their mother. Sometimes she came home ill and the boys still managed. She would go straight to bed. My great-grandfather writes about her with admiration, not sentimentality. She was not very tall. She worked every single day. She heard about Fred, May 1941, telegram or a man in uniform at the gate. We don't know exactly how the news came to her, but we know it came here. She'd had Bert and gave him away. She'd watched Bert come and go, lost her husband, and now Fred was gone too. Edward was still here, the lucky one, and my great-grandfather Frank was also here. And she kept going because she managed. Josephine's eldest son with Francis Sr., Frederick Clifford Lott, joined the Royal Navy as a young man. He didn't go reluctantly. He just felt like he should go because he felt like a burden. The work was intermittent, and then when a contract ended, you were out until the next one started. So one day, aged 18, he came home and announced he joined the Navy. He was always afraid that he'd be killed at sea. He nearly died once before, when the depot ship HMS Iron Duke was attacked at Scapa Flow. He survived. He had a wife by then, Elizabeth Hilda Pope, also known as Bessie. Elizabeth was a woman from Portsmouth, and they gave birth to a beautiful baby daughter called Anne in October 1939. She was called Anne Josephine Lott. Portsmouth was being bombed on the daily. Fred asked his mother if Bessie and Anne could move up to Newcastle and stay with them in Acton Place. They did, until later on they moved to Forest Hall. He was then drafted onto HMS Hood, a great capital ship that very rarely had to go out to sea. He thought he was safe. On the 24th of May 1941, HMS Hood intercepted the German battleship Bismarck in the Denmark Strait. A shell penetrated the deck. When the smoke cleared of 1,415 men, 3 survived. Frederick Clifford Lott was not one of them. They tried to keep a family connection, but it was difficult. Anne eventually went and married a man called David Tinburn from Whitley Bay. David was a ship's engineer. They lived in Killingworth. She had given one son to the Wraiths and Strays. Watched that same child take a trilby hat of her late husband and go off to Canada. Now one died on a warship in World War II. She was only left with 2. In September 1939, war was declared, and every British citizen had to register. They had to register their name, address, date of birth, gender, marital status, and employment status, with who employed them or what their occupation actually was. My great-grandfather Frank answered honestly. However, as for his mother Josephine, the topic of this documentary, she gave her date of birth as the 26th of July, which is correct as it matches the birth certificate. However, she also gave the year as 1888. But here's the thing I keep sitting with. Was that deliberate? Or did she just generally not know? Her parents were travelling traders, no fixed address for long. A family that moved from Govan to Kelso to Newcastle, all in the space of 2 years. Did anyone ever show her her birth certificate? Did she have one that was readily available for the family to see? It's possible that she knew the day from growing up, because someone had told her that, because that feels consistent. It matches the birth certificate, and she wasn't 73 when she passed. She gave officials 4 different years across her lifetime: 1888, 1889, 1891 and 1893. And the ones that she didn't fill in herself, 1890. 5 different versions of the same year. The question isn't just whether she lied, it's whether she knew at all. So let's count what changed. Birth name, Georgina Frederick Miller. Name from around 10, Josephine F. Miller. Name on the marriage certificate, Josephine Frederick Ina Miller. Name at death in 1964, Josephine Georgina Lott. 4 names, 1 person. Actual birth year, 1890. Years given to officials and family, 1888, 1889, 1891 and 1893. 5 different answers to the same question. Her father's occupation in the 1891 census, a hawker. Her late father's occupation on her 1919 marriage certificate, a blacksmith. 1 real, 1 aspirational. Her mother's fate, as told to her son, died in childbirth. Her mother's fate, per the 1901 and the 1891 census, still alive, just remarried, living in Hexham and Carlisle. Every record she touched, something shifted. She was so consistent in her inconsistencies that the people who loved her most had no idea there was anything underneath. And yet she got 1890 on the grave and got Kelso in her dictation. Edward put it there somewhere along the line, which means either Edward found something or she told him. If she told him the truth about the year that she was born in, about the name Georgina, about enough so that he could register the death correctly, it means that she could have told Frank, but she chose not to. After the war, Josephine moved to Long Benton. Her boys were grown. Edward, the youngest, had done his national service in the Fleet Air Arm, and Edward came home and got an apprenticeship at Parsons. He met a woman called Doreen, and they had a life. They had 3 kids amongst them, all sons. Frank, my great-grandfather, had served in the Navy too. He'd been an engineering petty officer. He'd come back, eventually married my great-grandma Jean, and had 3 children. Later, had 2 grandchildren, and then later had 2 great-grandchildren. And somewhere in those years prior to me and my sister, his great-grandchildren, he sat down and dictated everything he knew about the family history. And he put it in paragraphs about his mother, born Josephine Miller, in 1893 in Kelso in the Scottish borders, about how her mother died in childbirth. He believed it, every word of it, because she told him and she'd never contradicted herself. Not once. And she was his mother. You always believe what your mother says about where she came from. By the 1960s, she's living in 185 Stoneleigh Avenue. She was a widow. She buried her husband and buried one of her eldest children too. She'd sent her firstborn out of wedlock to Canada and never really got him back. And the 2 that remained, Frank and Edward, knew 2 completely different things about her. Frank knew the story she'd told. Edward may have known the truth. And on the 17th of August 1964, at 74 years old, at the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, the RVI, she died, and Edward registered the death. She was 74. That's the last document she ever appears in, and it's the most honest one. I'm here at Stoneleigh Avenue in Longventon, Josephine's last known public address, apart from Waterloo Road. She moved here after the war, once her boys were grown. This is a quiet street, full of modest houses, but this isn't the street she would have known. These houses are new builds now, clean brickwork, fresh paving, and modern windows. The old block of flats that once stood here, gone completely, replaced, smoothed over. Nothing about it would have told you who she was, or what she had carried. She was Georgina Frederick Millar in 1890. She was Josephine F. Miller visiting with her mother in Hexham in 1901. She was a housemaid in Newcastle as Josephine Miller. She was the nurse on the Lusitania in 1914, a pub manager on New Bridge Street during the war, a widow on Acton Place, with 3 boys and a collection round. And now here she's just an address. Josephine Georgina Lott, 185 Stoneleigh Avenue, Longventon. But even this address isn't really hers anymore. The building she lived in has disappeared. The flats are gone. The walls she touched, the stairwells she climbed, the windows she looked out from, all demolished, replaced by a row of houses, built decades later by people who never knew that she existed. And somewhere in the years she was living here, in that block of flats, or on this patch of ground, she may have told Edward the truth, or he may have found something she kept, a certificate or a letter, because Edward knew 1890, and the only way he could have known is if she said something or he had found something. She walked out of here to get to Waterloo Road to later go to the RVI, and she never came back. The strange thing is, there's nothing left of the place she actually knew. It just doesn't exist anymore. It's like the evidence of her was physically erased within the demolition. She was here, somewhere exactly beneath these houses. She sat in this street and lived the final version of her very own life. Josephine Georgina Lott, no longer Georgina Frederick Millar. I'm here at Heaton Cemetery, at her grave. The family had been here before. We'd never looked carefully at the dates. We thought we already knew when she was born and when she had died. 1890, the year on the birth certificate. The year that fits the age that Edward said she was on her death certificate. And it's here too, carved in stone. It was here the whole time. Someone who arranged this headstone knew 1890 was the correct year, but we know it wasn't my great-grandfather, as he thought it was 1893. And someone who approved it did, which means one of 3 things. They either found the birth certificate after she had died, or they'd looked through her things and found a document she'd kept, or someone close to her always knew. Edward put 1890. It's feasible to say Edward had a hand in both. We don't know which, but if Edward knew, and we believe he did, then she let him know. She chose him to know. She gave 4 different birth years to 4 different sets of people in the course of her life. On the wartime registration and on the 1911 census, she said she was born in 1888. Same on the marriage certificate. On the ship manifest, 1888 too. To the other censuses, 1890. Her son Frank, 1893. To when she was actually born, 1890. And here it also says 1890, matching the birth certificate. The grave was telling us the real answer after all this time. We just hadn't thought to actually believe it after what we had found out. She couldn't do anything about the grave. She was dead. Someone else decided what had happened, and whoever that was, they knew. They knew her true date of birth. There's a plaque on this grave in front of me here that has my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother's names. This was made by my great-aunt Chris. Frank Sr. started this, then Fred, then Josephine. Edward's buried here too, supposedly. Or it's a plaque. This could have been done by my great-aunt Chris. This could have been done by any of Ted's children. It could have been organised by Doreen. We don't know. But what we do know is that Josephine is indeed buried here in Heaton Cemetery in High Heaton. She was the daughter of travelling traders, a father who was a hawker, no fixed shop, no fixed place, and a mother who left and started again with a new man named Christopher, who lived again under a brand new name. Georgina grew up in a family that understood that you could go to somewhere else and reinvent yourself. By the time she was 10, her mother was remarried in Hexham. She was a visitor in that house, and her father had taken her to supposedly Rothbury to be raised by relatives, her Uncle Jim and Aunt Ada, and she chose a new name, Josephine. She was only 10 years old. Then she had a child that she couldn't keep. Then she crossed the Atlantic on a ship that would sink 6 months later. Then she managed to pub through a wall. Then she married and had 1 child prior with the man and 2 children afterwards. She buried her husband and lived off her widow's pension with 3 children on 10 shillings a week, along with the collection round. Then she lost one of her children to World War II on the HMS Hood, Fred. Prior to this, she'd watched Bert come and go and sail off to Canada in her husband at the time's Toby hat, and only went once, just asked for money to buy a horse. And then she grew old, and she went to the RVI and she passed. And Edward registered her death and put 1890. She may have shaved years off her age to get work, but she may have generally not known when she was born. She gave her father a respectable trade. She turned her mother's absence into a death, because dead is simpler than complicated. She told one son one story, and perhaps told another son the other. She built the life she needed, though. Name by name, year by year. She was so good at it that we generally don't know where the deception ends and where the genuine uncertainty begins. Maybe she wasn't either. What I do know is that for 2.5 years, my grandfather and I have sat in front of a laptop and searched for her, and every time we thought we found her, she had a brand new spelling or a brand new date of birth, and then we found the birth certificate. And I stood outside that house in Kelso, and it started to feel like we were getting somewhere. And then we found the death certificate, and Edward had written 1890, and I realised that she'd let someone else carry it. She hadn't taken it all the way with her. That's the closest thing to an ending we'll ever have. Not an answer, not a full explanation, just that she let someone know. She left a thread, and we found it.